Hey everybody, it's Mike Sedini from Walk the Talk America, and I'm with fellow board member Jake Wiskerson. And at lunch, I realized something that I know nothing about ghost guns. In principle, I know what they are, right? But I never understood how much they cost and what goes into making them. And I think the problem that most people have is they don't understand that it's not something that an 8-year-old could just pull off, right? So I've armed hundreds of thousands of Americans through two-step distribution, buying from my manufacturers, but I've never really sat down to produce a gun myself. So Jake and I were at lunch having this conversation, and so many things came up, and that's why I want to throw it to you to talk about why this is so difficult to do. It's easy to, I don't want to say that it's impossible,
right?
But why, for the person who is not into the firearms culture or the 2A community, like why that's not just I go out and make my own gun instantly.
So it's pretty hard if you want to do it from scratch. Now this base element here that we would call an 80% lower. So this is the lower half of the gun. This is the upper half of the gun. It consists of the slide, the barrel. There's some spring in here, and some sights that you would mount on top. All this stuff has to be purchased separately from this piece of plastic. There's several companies that do this. One is called Polymer 80, and they're manufactured right here in Nevada out of a town called Dayton. And you can buy these things. They're called Polymer 80, and it comes with it's basically a big lump of plastic, and that's all it is. There's no trigger. You see there's a trigger on here. There's some metal stuff inside, and you have to buy all that separately, and you have to know where to go to buy it, and there's several websites that sell these things. But this is basically just a lump of plastic when you get it, and you get a little kit, and it wraps around. It's a box. It folds in, and you have to take a drill, and you have to drill out certain holes, and then you have to take a Dremel, and you have to carve out some of the plastic that's embedded in it that otherwise doesn't work, and you have to get it out of the way. And so I had the privilege of doing this last December when we did the Walk the Talk America at the intersection of guns and mental health course. And Rob Pincus, who is also one of our board members, guided, I don't know, a dozen of us through this process of drilling out and making our own firearms. And the hang up with ghost guns, and I'll put that in air quotes because they're not really an apparition that just kind of shows up in your living room uninvited like a spirit ghost, is people have labeled them as such because they don't have a serial number on it. Now, and I would walk this close to the camera, and I don't know if you can see that, but on this plate, normally in a gun like this, it's styled after a Glock 17 is the model. There would be a serial number imprinted on there, and there would be some registry maintained by the manufacturer. And unless you live in a state that requires a registration of that serial number upon purchase, no one knows who owns a gun. And I think that's the hang-up. Most people think that, well, all guns are traced, all guns are tracked, and if you have a serial number, then we know who owns a gun, and if they sell it, then we know who transferred it to that person and whatnot. Well, that's not true with a ghost gun. And ghost guns are, I don't really like the term, actually. It's kind of pejorative, and it sounds like it's, it's just some I don't know, firearm chicken pox that descends from the ether and lands in your living room.
That's what the whole point is, though.
Right.
It's ghost. It just shows up in your house.
Right, and that's not true. A lot of effort went into this. I spent about 4 hours just drilling out the thing and sanding it and making sure that all the parts did what they need to do. And you can see that there's nothing in here. I can look through the camera in the magazine well, and there's no bullets in here, so it's safe. But I bought all this stuff, and it cost me several $100s on top of the several hours that it took me to create the thing. And then I can slide this slide on top of the gun, and if I put a magazine in here and I loaded a round in the chamber, I could then shoot said gun. But it's really hard, and you have to have a lot of technical knowledge, and you have to have the tools. And I don't know how many people own a Dremel or even a power drill, let alone the knowledge to know where to buy these things, but they don't just appear out of nowhere. I think what scares people the most is the idea that they can't be tracked. And the simple fact is that not all states have laws that track guns. There is some push, admittedly, for the federal government to track all guns, and if that ever gets accomplished, and there's some central repository into which we put these numbers and the people who own these guns associated with the numbers, and then we can track the purchase and so forth, well, then we can have a perception of safety, and we can know who commits certain crimes and who owns certain things, and we can chase them down if something ever goes sideways. And the ghost gun threatens that because it can be made in your own home. The other part of this that's much harder is that the aforementioned Rob Pincus, who is one of our board members, as I'm sweeping you with my muzzle, but we all know it's safe, is that Rob has printed some of these on a 3D printer, and so you can load in some software, print it on your 3D printer, pull the thing out, and you still have to go through the process of hollowing out, drilling the holes, putting in the pins, buying the trigger,
Getting certain parts.
yeah, the magazine release, the slide, the barrel, the spring, the sights. Like, it's actually pretty hard, especially these days now that the market is what it is with regard to how available parts are. Not every teenager can just show up with one of these. It's not a thing. You have to know what you're doing. You have to source them from several different locations and sites, and it's really quite difficult. I think what the gun community is trying to do is protect the ability for people to manufacture in their home some device that shoots a projectile known as a bullet without government regulation. And I can empathize with that, and that seems reasonable, because I could easily take a tube of some sort and a clamp and some sort of rubber band mechanism and slam a hammer into the primer and fire a bullet just the same as I could with this, scary looking pistol sort of thing that replicates a normal purchase over the counter type of pistol. How far is the regulation going to go with regard to regulating ghost guns? I don't know, and I think that's the debate that we have.
Well, let me frame it up this way. So you could go down to a store right now, buy a firearm, right? In 2 weeks, sell it to me, and I could go do something horrific with it.
Correct.
Right? You could make that gun,
Do the same exact
same thing,
right?
sell it to me, and I could do something horrific with it.
Yeah, and I think the spooky thing is we don't know who made it and who tracked it and where you are and what you did with it and all that sort of thing. And I think
But the crime's already been done.
It has, and I think just like having security cameras on your house, they don't protect you from anything. All they do is aid you in prosecution of the crime that's already been committed. And I think it's a really important point to make, is that the perception of security hinges solely on the ability to, in a minority report sense, anticipate crimes before they happen. And I think as mental health professionals, which I am, we don't want to infringe on people's ability to access care if they're struggling based on the individual's perception that we're going to infringe on some future event that may or may not happen, and thus prevent them from getting care.
Right. So there you have it. Coming from the mental health guy and the ungunned gun guy, right? I've armed hundreds of thousands of people over my time in the firearms industry, but I've never really paid attention to the actual mechanics of building your own gun. Today at lunch, it was an eye-opener when Jake told me the amount of money he has spent to build his own firearm. Once again, I think the problem is everyone thinks that it's like a printer. Just like you print out a Word document, you print out a gun, and that's just not true. And once again, these are legislation items that probably will get us nowhere and not
Actually save lives.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Yeah.
So
again, we thank you for paying attention to this stuff. If you have questions, please hit us up in the info@wtta.org email. Ask questions. We invite questions. We're ignorant in certain areas. We readily admit that. We don't know everything. This is my first ever hand-built, homemade firearm, and I'm happy to own it. It shoots well. It shoots accurately. But I don't know everything there is to know. And I also don't know everything there is to know about psychotherapy. So if you have questions about that, please reach out as well. We'd love to engage in dialogue, because that's what really moves this conversation forward, is open-mindedness to questions that people have about areas of which they don't know. So thanks for watching, and we will see you again in the next video.